Concentrate up. There's a person out there who society thinks is damaged. He's the guy who turns down party invites, no longer due to the fact he's shy, however due to the fact we're given something better to do. He is the one who would not put up each meal on Instagram, doesn't need constant attention, and does not lose his thoughts while his cell phone dies. And you understand what? Society calls him weird. But right here's the factor that'll blow your mind. This guy isn't always simply dwelling. He is thriving in approaches that could make the common interest, searching for validation, hungry individual lose their absolute why. Due to the fact while anyone else is drowning within the noise, he has discovered something most of the people spend their whole lives looking for: authentic energy. Let me paint you a photograph of what we've got all been told is ordinary. Awaken and straight away check what all of us else is doing, thinking, feeling. Fill every quiet second with different humans' voices, podcasts at some stage in commutes, history chatter at paintings, consistent texting and calling. In no way take a seat in silence due to the fact that feels bizarre or uncomfortable. Always need plans. Constantly want organization. Continually want someone else round to feel approximately ourselves. Sound familiar? Right here's where it gets interesting, and in which most folks start feeling uncomfortable. What takes place whilst a person eliminates all that noise? What occurs once they strip away the regular need for external validation, the infinite chatter, the determined search for belonging in crowds that call for conformity? They find out something terrifying. They find out who they genuinely are. And for most of us, it truly is scarier than any horror film we're going to ever watch. We have been so busy being who we think we need to be that we have forgotten who we in reality are beneath all of the performance. But not this man. The man who loves being by myself made an exclusive choice. A choice that society desperately wishes us to accept as true with is wrong. He checked out the sector and stated, "That is bullshit." Now, not in an indignant manner, not in a depressed manner, however, in a clear, decisive way that cut through all of the noise and landed on one simple reality. We've been dwelling a person else's script. Following regulations written with the aid of entrepreneurs, prompted by way of folks who do not care about us, chasing desires that aren't even ours. We're like actors who forgot we have been acting, completely misplaced in a position it really is slowly suffocating our actual nature. However, what occurs while someone refuses to play that sport? Why do you watch society pushes so hard for constant connection? Why do you think each movie, each music, every advertisement tells us that being on my own equals being broken? Why do you believe you studied loner is dealt with like a dirty word? Because they realize something we are just beginning to determine out. The person who is cozy in his own pores and skin cannot be managed. He cannot be manipulated. He can't be bought in security wrapped in pretty applications. He doesn't need their products, their validation, or their permission to be satisfied. He's finished something most people spend their entire lives chasing: internal peace. And he did not get it from a guru, a self-help ebook, or a wellness retreat. He were given it from the most radical act feasible in our hyper-connected global. He sat on my own with himself and refused to run. Here's what Arthur Schopenhauer discovered lengthy earlier than Instagram existed. A man may be himself best as long as he is alone. Reflect on consideration on that for a 2D. When changed into the ultimate time, any folks were really by myself. No longer just physically on my own while multitasking through lifestyles, but sincerely by myself with our thoughts. No distractions, no intellectual pacifiers, just us and the uncooked, unfiltered reality of our very own minds. Scared, but most folks are. This is why we fill each moment with noise. We're afraid of what we'd find out inside the silence. However, the man who loves being on my own, he is now not fearful of that silence. He owns it, whilst all of us else is fighting for interest in a crowded room, screaming to be heard over the chaos. He is sitting in his quiet corner constructing something top-notch. He's no longer seeking to shape in because he is too busy standing out. No longer through desperate interest searching for, but through the quiet self-assurance of someone who knows precisely who he is. Here's where things get really uncomfortable for the gadget we are all trapped in. This guy would not want outside approval. He does not need applause. He would not want others to recognize him, validate him, or maybe acknowledge he exists, and that makes him dangerous. Now, not dangerous in a damaging manner. Dangerous inside the manner that threatens everything society has taught us to trust about happiness and success. The gadget has convinced us that happiness comes from outside resources, different people, possessions, achievements that others can see and applaud. It has created a whole economic system based totally on our insecurity, our want to belong, our worry of being on my own. But what occurs when someone breaks free from that device? What happens whilst someone discovers that actual contentment does not come from the gang? It comes from within. They become untouchable, need to understand why the machine fears him, due to the fact he is now not an awesome patron. He does not buy things to fill emotional voids. He does not need retail therapy, popularity symbols, or stories designed to impress others. He's not scrolling forever and ever via content material designed to hold him distracted and disappointed. He's not hooked on the dopamine hits that keep the majority's interest fractured and their wallets empty. He is economically risky because he's psychologically loose. Whilst maximum of us are renting our peace from different humans, borrowing our 310 EO 1671 F8 CDCA 56 BBFCD 482,325,088 from approval and popularity, leasing our happiness from relationships that would disappear the next day, this man owns his peace. Marcus Aurelius figured this out nearly 2,000 years ago. Nowhere can man discover a quieter or extra, untroubled retreat than in his very own soul. Reflect on consideration on the humans all of us recognize who appear to continually be in a few form of drama. Their mood depends on who calls them back, who consists of them in plans, who validates their selections. They're like emotional ping-pong balls bouncing between highs and lows based totally on how other humans deal with them. Now, consider the alternative. Believe a person whose mood, whose sense of 310 EO 1671 F8 CDCA 56 BBF CD 482,325,088, whose entire emotional nation is absolutely unbiased of outside occasions, someone who is definitely satisfied, whether they're at a party or sitting alone in their room. This is terrifying to the machine as it exhibits something we've all been taught to avoid, that we've been living as emotional slaves, completely dependent on others for our fundamental mental desires. What he's surely doing in all that solitude. Here's what society receives incorrect about the man who loves being on my own. They assume he is doing not anything. They may be dead wrong. At the same time as others are busy consuming, ingesting drama, consuming different people's evaluations, he's developing. He's analyzing books that enlarge his thoughts rather than mindlessly eating drama that shrinks it. He is growing capabilities in place of developing addictions to instant gratification. He's having deep conversations with himself instead of shallow conversations with people who do not virtually recognize him. But here's the component that'll truly mess along with your head. He's not doing any of this to prove a point. He's now not seeking to be unique or advanced. He is doing it because it feels right to him. Because when someone strips away all of the noise, all the expectations, all of the that is what emerges. That is who he absolutely is. Carl Jung had a progressive perception that maximum of us spend our whole lives strolling from elements of ourselves we don't need to face. He evolved the concept of the shadow, representing the hidden, repressed, or denied elements of our character that we strive to maintain buried. But here's Jung's profound discovery. Individuals who simply confront and combine those hidden elements of themselves, who sit down on my own with all their contradictions, fears, and imperfections, grow to be psychologically whole. Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you genuinely are in preference to who you watched you must be. Whilst most people are projecting our fears onto others, blaming the sector for our problems, or drowning our insecurities in noise and distraction, the person who loves being by myself is doing something lots braver. He is searching in the replicate, not the Instagram clear-out mirror that shows us what we want to peer, the actual reflect that suggests the whole lot, the good, the terrible, the unpleasant, and the entirety in among. And instead of strolling from what he sees, he makes pals with it. That is what makes him dangerous in the fine, viable way. Whilst others are fragmented, part of them hidden, a part of them fake, a part of them determined for approval, he's integrated. He is entire, he's actual, and that type of authenticity is magnetic. The nature element, finding your why. Friedrich Nietzsche dropped this bomb. He who has a why to live can undergo nearly any how. Maximum folks are dwelling backwards. We're so centered at the how. The way to get greater popularity, how to healthy in, how to keep away from being on my own, that we in no way discover our why. But solitude forces someone to confront the massive questions. Once they strip away all of the distractions, all of the outside noise, they are left with the maximum important query of all. What genuinely topics to them, no longer what their parents assume should depend. Now, not what society says must depend, not what gets the maximum approval or popularity. What truly, clearly, deeply matters to them. The man who loves being alone has replied that question. And once someone is aware of their why, after they've observed what without a doubt drives them from the inner out, the entirety else becomes heritage noise. It really is once they end up dangerous, because they are no longer controlled by way of the gang. They're free. Right here's what's occurring. Even as anybody else is appearing their lives on social media, this man is building something actual. However, what is he building? He's constructing mental strength. Whilst others are weakening their interest span with steady stimulation, he's strengthening his ability to awareness deeply on what subjects. He's constructing emotional resilience, whilst others are becoming extra fragile, greater dependent on outside validation. He's turning into greater solid, more self-enough. He's building real relationships, not loads of shallow connections, however some deep ones with folks that simply recognize and respect who he truly is. He's constructing skills, real skills, skills that come from deep exercise. However, here's the component that'll genuinely blow your thoughts. He's building all of this while not having to inform everyone about it. He is now not posting progress updates, no longer searching for applause, not fishing for compliments. He's just building, and whilst the arena sooner or later sees what he's created in his work, in his man or woman, inside the quiet self-assurance he carries, they're bowled over. Where did this come from? How did he get so excellent at this? Whilst did he emerge as so stable? The answer is straightforward. At the same time as others were acting, he turned into practicing. Maximum folks are slaves and do not even are aware of it. We suppose we are loose due to the fact we can choose between one of kind ways to stay busy, distinctive varieties of enjoyment to devour, distinct ways to distract ourselves from the growing emptiness inner. But the guy who loves being on my own, he has found out that true freedom would not come from having extra selections. It comes from needing fewer of them. He does not want to be entertained every moment because he has learned to locate joy in easy things. He would not need constant validation due to the fact he has learned to validate himself. He does not need to escape from his mind because he has made peace with them. It is actual freedom, and it scares the hell out of a society that earnings from our enslavement. Now, I recognize what a number of us are thinking, but what about connection? What approximately love? What about network? Truthful questions. However, right here's what we might be lacking. The person who loves being on my own isn't towards connection. He's in opposition to faux connection. He is no longer unsocial. He's anti-bullshit. He'd, as an alternative, have one actual conversation than 100 shallow ones. He'd, as a substitute, have one man or woman who clearly knows him than 1,000 friends who only know his public photo. Exceptional over amount isn't only a saying to him. It is a manner of lifestyles, and right here's the actually uncomfortable fact. His relationships are probably deeper and extra meaningful than most due to the fact he brings his whole self to them. Now, not the fragmented, approval-searching for performance model of himself that lots of us carry to relationships. He brings the actual deal. Here's the ambiguity that'll blow your thoughts. The person who needs relationships the least often has the nice ones. Why? Due to the fact he's now not bringing neediness to the desk. He's no longer looking to extract validation, safety, or identification from other human beings. He is now not appearing to maintain others fascinated. He is bringing his whole complete self to relationships, not due to the fact he wishes to, however, due to the fact he chooses to. And choice is infinitely more powerful than want. When a person spends time with him, they are aware of its true. Whilst he cares about someone, they know it's real. Whilst he commits to something, they comprehend it's strong. He's dangerous to the dating industry, the connection advice industry, the complete economic system built around humans' romantic insecurities. Actual leaders aren't made in boardrooms. They're cast in solitude, because leadership isn't approximately controlling others. It is approximately mastering yourself. It is approximately being so focused, so clean, so unshakable that others evidently need to observe. The man who loves solitude has spent years growing the maximum essential management great self-knowledge. He knows his strengths, his weaknesses, his motivations, his fears. And whilst a person is aware of themselves that deeply, they end up enormously powerful at the whole thing they do. Every important non-secular subculture has recognized this mystery. The route to enlightenment runs via solitude. Buddha discovered it below a tree alone. Jesus located it inside the barren region by myself. Muhammad observed it in a cave by myself. No longer because they have been unsocial. However, due to the fact reality can best be determined in silence. The person who loves solitude is not always religious. He's spiritually risky because he's determined God or peace or truth or whatever you want to name it, and he did not want and group to get there. Here's something nobody talks about. Solitude changes your frame. While you prevent residing in constant stress about what others think, your nervous gadget relaxes, whilst you forestall flooding your system with the chaos of consistent social interaction, your power returns. You sleep higher because you are no longer replaying social interactions to your head. You devour better due to the fact you're taking note of your frame rather than consuming socially. You circulate better due to the fact you are connected to yourself. He's not simply mentally thriving, he's bodily optimized. Right here's what this all comes down to. The man who loves being by myself has discovered the largest secret in human psychology. You don't need all people else's permission to be happy. You don't want their approval to live your life. You do not need their understanding to make picks that experience right to you. You don't need their validation to recognize your really worth. And after you sincerely remember the fact that, the whole lot changes. No longer due to the fact your external situations necessarily change, however due to the fact your relationship with the one's occasions transforms completely. You prevent being a sufferer of your surroundings and come to be the architect of your enjoy. The man who loves being by myself isn't just thriving, he is unfastened. And after you taste that freedom, after you enjoy that peace, when you feel that power, you recognize that the entirety you have been taught approximately happiness, achievement, and success has been backwards. The solution isn't always accessible. It's in here. And the journey to locate it begins the instant you stop going for walks from yourself and start running closer to who you are supposed to be. If this opened your eyes to something you've been feeling but couldn't put into words, you recognize what to do. The man who loves being by myself isn't always simply surviving. He's showing us all what it approach to be actually alive. And that is probably precisely what the arena desires proper now.